Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of season 2 of the Norwalk Film Festival podcast. On today's episode, we have Karen Turner, the director of Even the Women Must Fight. Karen, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So first of all, so it's a little bit of background of the film. It's Even the Women Must Fight brings to film for the first time the voices of Vietnamese women who took up arms to support Ho Chi Minh's armies after the U.S. bombed their northern villages. That's the general summary of the film. It's a very moving documentary that tells the story of these Vietnamese women who fought during the Vietnam War. And before we talk about the film, why don't you tell us a little bit about your history and how you became so interested and involved in the this topic and just Vietnam in general.
Well, I'm actually a China specialist, but I found myself in Hanoi in 1993 with my husband, who's a Vietnam vet, and he was
Mm.
teaching at Hanoi National University. And while I was living in a neighborhood, I met a woman, a Vietnamese woman, my colleague Phan Thien Hao, who was very, very interested in doing something about these women. Many people in Vietnam don't even know about the women who
Mm.
fought because they were hidden in the jungles.
Uh,
And so I started on this project with no background except, I'm an Asianist, and it became a passion for me. I feel like a spirit took over myself. I've been working on it for a very long time. And part of it is, as you say, this is the Vietnamese side, but it's also about women in war. And there are a
mm.
lot of themes in the film that speak to the issue of women in war.
Yeah, it's I mentioned before we started recording, but it's something that the Vietnam War in America is pretty undertaught and undereducated, especially hearing the voices from the Vietnamese side. So it's a great story to watch and hear these women tell about their experiences. Tell us a little bit how you got all this footage and all of these all of these interviews and then lots of historical footage as well too from.
Well, I call myself a director, but in fact, I really had to use what I could get. The interviews were they were done by a cameraman who was a Vietnamese guy who sat with these women and talked with them in their homes. And I feel that's important. It wasn't me interviewing them.
Mm,
It was a colleague, a young man who wanted to hear their stories. And so he filmed the interviews. The archival footage, most of it has never been seen in the United States because it's Vietnamese. My friend Phan Thien Hao went to the military archives and other places in Hanoi to get the footage. And then two combat cameramen from the war, Vietnamese men, allowed me to use some of their footage.
oh wow.
So it's very, very rare, I think, and I feel it backs up what the women are saying.
Yeah.
What they're saying, and then we see what they're doing. So it's priceless footage, really. Yeah.
Yeah. What was it like sorting through all of that?
Well, I'm not the editor, and I'm not
Yeah, that's
not a
good.
visual person. I'm a historian,
Mhm.
but I sorted through it for years, working with editors, maybe for 10 years. I made an earlier film that was a different kind of film, so I already had some sort of a template. What I wanted to do with this one, I wanted it to be 25 minutes because I'm a history teacher and I know about attention spans in the class. And also, I just wanted to focus on the women themselves and their
Mhm.
story. So it's been a long haul to get to this place.
Now, I think if I was reading your bio correctly, was this story a book first that you then adapted into a film? So what was
Yes.
it like, taking it from just words into visual?
Yeah, so it was a book. Hanthein How and I made a book, wrote a book together, published in 1998, and then the book was translated into Vietnamese.
Mm.
And the interesting thing is the women in the film actually read the book in Vietnam,
Okay.
and they were very grateful to have their service honored. And we had to make a couple of changes. There were a couple things they didn't like, and we had to
Mm.
change. And so that was why we were invited to film this reunion and these women. We'd already established some trust.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, and when I teach, the film shows their pride.
Mhm.
And if you read this, you think, "Oh, well, they were tortured, they were forced to volunteer." People say, "Well, why did they volunteer?" And I say, "Well, their villages were being bombed, right?" I
Right.
mean, but when you see their faces and their pride, it's something that print can't capture, no matter how hard I try. So,
Right.
yeah.
I mean, you get that just that like little look in somebody's eye that shows like, yeah, we wanted to do this. And there was one quote going through that from they asked one of the women, like, did you cry? And she said, hell no.
That's my
Like,
favorite.
yeah.
That sequence is rare. That just happened. I don't know how that happened, but the mother started talking about the daughter not having children.
Hmm.
And the daughter, you could see her in the film. She's very active, she's organizing people, but her mother thinks she's a total loser. And so the story kind of is interesting to see the mother making that statement. And then, the hell no, I didn't cry. But then she makes a statement about what happened to her daughter who couldn't
Hmm.
have children. Yeah, I love that. And it really does translate from Vietnamese into hell no.
Yeah. I know it's so great to just see these stories. And yeah, as you said, in the you get to see how they're emoting and understanding and processing the history,
Mhm.
which is really great. Um, so what do you other than understanding the story, what do you hope that American audiences are taking, other than telling these stories, like what do you think the American audience should be taking to listening to these women?
Well, one of the reasons they talked to me, they told me this. They said, if people know the cost of war and what we
Mhm.
suffered, maybe Americans will never go to war again. They felt that their story needed to be told for that reason. Of
Mm,
course, we're going to war again,
yeah.
but I think that was one of their motives, and also to have their history recorded. But I want people to see, first of all, that women can take pretty close to combat roles.
Hmm.
The Army's debating that right now. I think the military,
Hmm.
because they work together. They were able to work together, and they said better than men. But I also wanted the Vietnamese side to be told because so often it's ignored. I mean, there are books
Hmm.
published still about why did we lose the war, right?
Right.
And then Kristen Hanna just wrote a book called The Women, very popular book, and it's about American nurses who went to Vietnam.
Mm,
It's getting huge attention, but it's still the American point of view, and
mhm.
it's fiction.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
yeah, I want people to just think about war in a different way and think about women in war perhaps in a different way.
Yeah. I mean, you think of, I mean, you see the pictures on TV or whatever, but you don't think of the lasting impact generations later, as you see in the one story that's it. Yeah, it affects everybody. And I thought one other interesting thing that, as you said, that these women were, near the front lines and doing everything they could to help, but they weren't being given the support that like the
Mhm,
main troops were. Like they said, they were all suffering from malaria, but they didn't
mhm,
get, the medicines were sent to the troops on the front lines, and like they were
mhm.
just working through it and suffering, but still doing it because that's what they believed in. So it was
That's
so
right.
very powerful stuff.
Yeah, I think that Vietnamese women just I would say they do the work and the men worry. I'm writing a piece right now about what the presence of women in the field, how it affected men. It's a
Mm.
very interesting topic because women saw the weakness of the men.
Hmm.
One of them said, I held him while he died and called for his mother, and he was a high ranking military officer. And she said, I will never fear men again. When you think about why men don't want women in the field, it's an interesting it's an interesting thought. Yeah.
Do you, for anybody listening or who after they see this film, do you have any other recommended reading or or documentaries that they might want to check out to hear more stories like this, or just from the Vietnamese point?
No, I think there's a book called, Saigon Sisters, and it's about elite women in the South who took the communist, cause up and at their peril, and it's called Saigon Sisters, and I think that offers a different view of elite women,
Hmm.
not in the North, but in the South, where it was very dangerous for them to take these. So that's one book I would recommend for sure. There just haven't been many, books written about the women, but one book that I think is really interesting, and my colleague Fontaine Howe translated it, is called The Sorrow of War. It's a Vietnamese fiction novel written by a veteran who, and it's a very powerful book. And I think it's sort of like All Quiet on the Western Front, you
Mm,
know. And I think that one I would recommend to anybody who wants to hear the Vietnamese side unvarnished, really. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's the hard part too, is like finding it not filtered through some sort of Western lens
Yes.
is the hard part.
Yes.
So are you working on any other documentaries or any other projects like this now, or what are you working on?
Oh, I'm writing some, we're writing some, background information for an exhibition at Holy
Mm,
Cross in the fall on Vietnamese women's dress, and the part that I'm working about is about how their appearance in the field affected the men during the war, and I have some very priceless sources for that, so I'm picking through those again. This is probably my last film. I'm not a filmmaker, I'm a historian who fell into a wonderful story, you know, and I ran with it, and I didn't have a budget, I financed this myself,
Well,
but I had help all along the way. A lot of people donated their time, you know, so it's a kind of a very big group project, both here and in Vietnam. A
mhm.
lot of support in Vietnam for the project.
That's great. I mean, as with any project like this, it's where you're very passionate about it. It takes a lot of people helping out and donating their time and expertise to make it come to life. So,
Yes.
I mean, we're glad that everybody was able to do so because it's a wonderful story that deserves to be told, and we're so happy to include it in our festival.
Okay, that one thing, it's being distributed by a company called Good Docs,
Oh, okay.
and that has been bought now by Sage Educational Resources.
Hmm.
So it can be purchased and streamed through those resources for, and I really hope to reach the educational audience for
Yeah.
the film. So that's how people can see it. And also we have a website called Even the Women Must Fight.
Perfect. All
Yeah.
right. So we'll make sure to link everybody to Even the Women Must Fight, and we will help spread the word to our educational connections here too to make sure to try and get it in some of our schools.
Thank you so much. I'm so appreciative.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat about the film today, Karen.
Okay.
And it's been great. For everybody listening, you can come out to the Norwalk Film Festival to see Even the Women Must Fight, along with several other documentaries and 50 plus other films. So we got a whole weekend of action. Even the Women Must Fight is just one of the many great options you have to come and check out. So thanks again for joining me, Karen, and can't wait for everybody to see your film on the big screen.
Thanks for all of your support. I appreciate it.